back with the third tutorial in the FirePro modding series. We have loaded up our exploding cage tutorial that we worked on last time, and we said that we were going to add a form to it and give the user some options. And there's two ways that we could do that. We could put it in the PWGR window, or we could have it pop up when the player initiates a cage match. I went with the second option. I'm going to have it pop up because then I can teach you how to make a borderless window that looks like it kind of fits in with the game. So that's what I decided to do instead of going with the just the PWGR window. We'll do another mod that makes use of the PWGR window stuff, and that way you will have practice doing that as well. But for now, we're going to go with the just with the pop-up window. So I have redone, I guess, because I worked on it to make sure everything was going to work. And let's hope it doesn't break like last time when I had it working, but for some reason it decided to stop working, or not to work when I did the tutorial. But so I redid this, so my namespace is now different than yours, and some of my class names and stuff might have changed. I don't think that I changed them, but you know, I may have. I guess I could take a look and make sure. I know my class name is different, or my namespace name. But let's see, Cage Explodes and Cage Explodes. Oh, that's the same one. And Cage Explodes. Okay, so that's the same. Now let's go into the timer and make sure that's the same. Explosion timer. We've got explosion elapsed with a capital. And we've got explosion elapsed with a lowercase. So I will make that with the capital just so it's the same. I'll come back here and fix this. Okay. So now we are on the exact same page except for the namespace, which won't matter for the purposes of our tutorial. So the first thing that we want to do is add the form. To do that, you're going to click here on your on the project that you're working on here, or a solution, I guess this technically is. Or nope, that's the solution, this is the project. Okay, so you want to click on the project. Mine is called Exploding Cage Tutorial because that's what my namespace is. Yours will just be called like Exploding Cage or Cage Explodes or whatever. But you right click on it and you hit add, and you come down here and it's going to say form, Windows form. You go ahead and click that, and it will open up a dialog box, and you just give this a name. I'm just going to call it Cage Explodes Form, and it's going to pop up a nice little form for you. And this is what we're going to modify to be our options form. That's the word I'm looking for, options form. So the first thing you want to do is come down here and give it a name, or so it won't look stupid on the text bar. I for some reason it bugs me. It always just gives you whatever name you give the form. So I just do that right away because I hate it. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to set it to no, the form border style. We're going to set that to none. So it's going to look like this now. Then we're going to come up here to back color, and we're going to change that to red. And we're going to go to forecolor and change it to white. And this will, when we put the background image on it, this will give it a nice, you know, it will make it, you'll see why in a sec. So I've already ripped the background image out, so I'm going to go ahead, and what you're going to do when you load up or view this project, there's going to be a link in the video description. Jesus, I can't talk tonight either. constantly doing that. So there's going to be a link in the video description with the image files that you need. So you're going to come in here and you're going to find the image files wherever you happen to download them and decompress the archive. You're going to be looking for tdialog background.png. You're going to go ahead and stick it in there, and then you're going to hit OK. And it's going to tile by default. You're just going to go ahead and say stretch. This stretches pretty well. I mean, you can get it into some, if you make it way too big, it can look a little silly. If you can get it into some like really awkward, like that, doesn't look very good. But generally, if you keep it at a reasonable size and you keep it, reasonably proportioned, it looks okay. So we're going to go ahead and you don't need this to be super big. I'm going to do that. We might resize it a little bit. If you're curious, mine is sized 625 by 354. So if you want to copy mine exactly, that's what you do. I hate that this also defaults to having everything open. I don't know why it started doing that. Old versions of Visual Studio didn't used to do that. You're just going to need common controls for this. That's all you're going to need. So I'm going to move a checkbox on here. This checkbox is just, we're going to change the text to cage explodes ? So if you check this off, the cage will explode. What we are going to want to do is go ahead and we're going to set this background color to transparent. That way you can see the background of the form through wherever you put the cage explodes checkbox. I'm going to put it right there. And then we also said we were going to do we were going to let you change the downtime, the minimum and maximum downtime for when you throw somebody into the exploding cage. So there we go. We're going to need 2 numeric up-down boxes. I just cut and paste after I placed one. You could pull them both off of here if you want to, but numeric up-down is what you're looking for. And then we're going to need some labels because we're going to want to label these. So go ahead and stick a label right next to them. I'm going to cut and paste that for a second label. That will go right next to that one. And we're going to change this to minimum downtime and maximum downtime, and we'll readjust where they're placed in a second. Oh, I forgot the colon on the end of that one. Okay, so now we can readjust these to be wherever we want. There we go. And we're going to click on them both. You can hold down Control to pick more than one little element on the form. And we're going to change the background to transparent on those as well. And then just to blend in better, I'm going to come over here. I use 525252. You don't have to. I like that kind of gray. It's not exactly the gray or black that's on the thing, but it works well. It's the gray that the mod pack uses, so that's just the one I use. And then we're going to change the forecolor to white. So now we've got that. And now I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to come up here to Format, and I'm going to say Center and Form horizontally. Just so that we have like a good starting point. And there we go. So now we've got some cage options. You can check off if the cage explodes. You can set the downtime, and now we just need to add an OK button. So we're going to bring a button in here. We'll stick it down here in the corner. We'll make the button say OK. And we'll change the background color to 52, 52, 52. And this is where you can do this if you want. These will also be in the images archive that you're going to download. So you're going to go import, and you're going to import button not active and button active. We're not going to worry about button clicked. So you can import those, and we're going to set it to button not active. And then we're going to go ahead and set the background to stretch so it matches the form, or so it matches the size of the button that we placed in here. And we're going to go ahead and do that. And there we go. So now we have a form that's going to look moderate, mostly Fire Pro-ish when it pops up. You can also, let's add a label to this so that people know what is popping up. Why not, right? So this label here, we're going to make this say exploding cage options. And we're going to change the size because that's too small. We're going to do 24. Let's do 24. And drag it out. We're going to go ahead and change it to transparent. And, well, this is highlighted here, or you can click on it again to get the format if you don't already have it. Center and form, and we're going to do that. So there we go. Now that will pop up. People will know what it is. You can go ahead and check things off. And when you click the button, the form will close, or that's what we'll tell it to do when we get to that point. After I finish laying out a form, I almost always come up here and hit Save All, so that everything gets saved in my project. And if something stupid was to happen, I don't have to redesign the form. So you might want to save now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we are going to go to the OK button and double click it. And what should happen is you should get a new, it should bring up a code view with a new method called private void button one click. With 2 arguments, an object sender and an event args e. In here, you're going to type close and then open close parentheses and a semicolon. That's when you click on that button, it's going to close the form. We're going to tell it to do more stuff here in the future, but you don't ever want to forget to include the close. So you can just do it right away. The next thing we need to do, I want downtime in seconds. So the game runs at 60 frames per second, and it's got code when it starts up that forces Unity to run it at 60 frames per second, even if you want it to be higher or lower or whatever. And that's kind of why when you turn on VSync and you have like when you have a pretty fast computer and a pretty fast whatever the hell it is, it can get really fast and awkward because it tries to override that 60 frames per second thing. And so it can try to run multiple seconds worth of game code in, like, let's say you have a refresh rate of 144. Well, that's going to just a little more than double the game speed for no apparent reason. And so that's why VSync is usually not a great idea unless you have a refresh rate of 60. So anyway, so I want this in multiples of seconds. And in order to do that, it needs to be multiples of 60 because the downtime is set in frames and not seconds. So we need to come down here to the increment. We're going to select both of these the numeric up-down boxes, come down to increment, and change this to 60. So now it will go, if you click it up or down, it will go up and down by 60. You can still type in other values, and they will be acceptable, as long as they're above the minimum and below the maximum. Or at the, you get what I mean. So yeah, you can still put in other values, but just using the up and downs, you're going to get multiples of 60 every time, and you don't have to think about it. So for the minimum downtime, I am going to set the min and max to be 0, and I am going to set the maximum to be 180. That way, you can't go too outrageous. That means that you could set it anywhere between no downtime and 3 seconds worth of downtime minimum. And then for the max downtime, I'm going to go ahead and set the minimum to 120. Or no, I'm going to set it to 60. That would make more sense. And I'm going to set the maximum to 240. So that means the minimum amount of downtime you can do is 1 second, and the maximum is 6 seconds. That way you give people some options, but you're not going to get a situation where they won't have any downtime, because that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. You can set it to 0 if you want to. As the minimum on this box, I highly recommend not doing that. It's going to look stupid. And then I'm going to set these to be what I want to be the defaults. So they have a value option right up here, and right now the value is 0. And my original mod went from 60 minimum to 180 maximum. So that's what I'm going to set the defaults to. So if the user doesn't do anything, the default is going to be 60 and 180. So, but that's what we're going to do there. And then I'm going to save again. And then we are going to need to make this appear. So what we're going to want to do is go back to our exploding cage form here, and we need to figure out where and how to make this appear. We know how to do it, so let's set that up first. We're going to go public static void. We know that we're going to have to inject this somewhere to make it appear, so public static void is a very good assumption. And we're going to call this show cage options. And we know that we're going to need to make a new cage options form, so let's do this. We'll go cage cage explodes form, cage form equals new cage explodes form. And then we got cage form.show or cage form.show dialog. We're going to want show dialog. We don't want the game to still be doing stuff while this is up. We want to stop what everything is doing until the user has set up the options. So that's what a show dialog does. If you just hit show, it will bring it up, but it won't necessarily stop the game from loading the cage, and that will be bad because if we add other options, we won't know. It won't give the game time to process those options because it will have already passed the point where it would have processed them. So, but there we go. We got show dialog, and the last thing that we need to do is cage form.dispose. Anytime you create a dialog, you need to dispose of that dialog after you're done with it, and we are going to be done with it by the end of this method. So I'm going to put a couple of spaces in there in case we decide to do anything. If not, we can get rid of them just for neatness. But for now, that way we have some spaces in here that we can work with if we need to do stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now we're going to need to do stuff. So there we go. So we've got, now it will show that thing as soon as this is triggered, but we don't really know where that's triggered yet. So this is where we bring up ILSpy again. So ILSpy is how we look through the code and decide where we want to hook things, if you remember from the last tutorial. So what we're going to want to do is find where a match loads, because we want to ask them this if the match is a cage match, and if, so we want to find out where a match loads from. And to do that, we're just going to look down our list of classes over here until we find something that looks like it could be, the match. So we are going to go down to M, and you're going to just look, and there's lots of match options here. There's match data, match end roll, match evaluation, etc., etc., etc. There's lots of them. The one that we are looking for, I can tell you from experience, is match main. That is like the main match class, as you probably have figured out by the name of it. And it's got all of these wonderful methods in it. It's got an awake, it's got a int match, initialize match, it's got all kinds of stuff. We are going to want to hook into the init match. That's going to be where you hook most things, because this will be after all of the players are set up. It will be after the arena is set up, it will be after all of like the referee, all of the important things have been set up by this point, and it's just initializing the match. So like like it initializes the round, it changes the tag damage rate if it's a tag match, that sort of thing. And so that's where we're going to hook into almost all the time when you need to hook into the match. And it's not like when you need to hook into the start of a match. Almost all the time you're going to use init match. So that's where we're going to plop our stuff, and we're just going to do it at the end. That is where it makes the most sense. We don't need to do it before anything else. So we're going to go ahead and plop that right into the end of init match. So you're going to go ahead and go hook, and then you're going to want target class equals, and then match main, target method equals, init match, injection, you want the injection location, and remember there's that special value, the int.max value, that's going to allow you to hook onto the end of the method no matter how long the method is. This will hook to the end of it. And then you're going to need to go injection direction dot before, and then inject flags equals, right now we don't need any as far as we know, so we'll do none, and then the group is exploding cage. Oh, we don't need the space. Exploding cage. And then end your parentheses, and there you go, you've got a hook. So now this will show the cage form, but it will show it every time a match loads. Well, we don't want that. I'm going to lessen the number of spaces. We decided that we only want this to show up when there is a cage match. Well, there is a couple of ways to figure out if your match is a cage match. One is checking the arena type. If players are not playing with the mod pack, this works, but you want to assume that players are probably going to be using the mod pack at this point. If they're using your mod, that they probably will be using the mod pack. It just makes sense, considering that the mod pack is kind of the major mod at this point, and that your mod requires the mod pack anyway. So they're definitely going to be using the mod pack, is pretty much what I'm trying to say. So what you're going to want to do is you need to find out the ring type, because there's a specific ring type of cage. And since we need that, we're going to go down and try to figure out how to figure out the ring type. And as luck would have it, there is a ring class. So let's check that first. And we're going to look around here, and you've got a bunch of stuff that doesn't look promising. You have cage collision data, but that's vector 2, so you know that's a unity positioning measurement. You have cage corner use, but that's an integer, so that's obviously not it. You have cage object, which is a game object and is private. You might be able to use that. Let's see what else we've got down here. We've got nothing else that looks like cagey stuff, but we do have a venue setting, which if you click on venue setting and go down to its class, and then back over because this thing is crazy, it does actually, if you look, have a ring kind and a ring kind enum. And you can see that the ring kind enum has a cage. So what we're going to need to do is get the venue setting from the ring class. And if you look in here, you're going to notice that the ring class has an instance. So we're going to need to get the instance of the ring class that has been loaded into the match and check its venue setting. I know that, again, that might seem confusing. I knew that it was venue setting. If you didn't know that, you might need to ask in the Discord, or you could have poked around a bunch. You could probably use this cage object and just check if it was not null, but I can't guarantee that that's going to work in every instance because I've never tried it. I would imagine that it would work, but for our purposes, we're just going to use the venue setting. It's super easy to do. So we're going to come back here and we're going to go if ring.inst does not equal null, because we need to make sure that we are not calling anything on a null instance, otherwise it will crash, and ring.inst.venueSetting dot ring kind equals, and then it's going to tell you that it accepts a ring kind enum, and then ring kind dot cage. And then we're just going to surround all of our code in that. And then so it will check to make sure that the ring instance isn't null and that the ring instance venue kind, or the ring instance venue setting dot ring kind equals a cage, and only then will it execute our code. Otherwise, it will just do nothing. And that's kind of what we want. So now it will only pop up if the player is playing a cage match, and that's what we want. So we're good there. And then you'll notice that we have an option on the form, but we're gonna kill the form at the end of our thing. So we can't check to see if this checkbox is checked every time. And the reason that we're killing the form is leaving these in memory costs, or leaving these, or not killing it costs memory. And so let's say the user runs like 12, 15, 100 cage matches for some reason without closing the game. Every one of your things is just going to be sitting in memory. We don't want that at all. So that's why we're going to kill it at the end every time. What we are going to do is set up some static Boolean values and integer values that we can capture the data on the form. That way we can kill the form and still have the information. And because the information doesn't have a layout and graphics and events and all that other stuff, it takes up way less memory. So we are going to want to set up a public static bool called cage explodes. And we're going to set that to false just by default. And we're going to want to set up a public static int for min downtime, and we're going to set that to 60 by default. And then we're going to set up a public static int max downtime, and we're going to set that to 180 by default. And so there we go. We've got our values that we're going to capture from our form. So now we need to go make the form save or change these values. So we're going to go back into our exploding cage form. And if you have it closed, you can bring it open by clicking on the form thing, and it's going to open up like this. And you can get to where we need to go by clicking on the OK button twice. So just double-clicking it, and it's going to do this. So what we're going to do is right before our close command, we are going to say cage explosion, or cage explodes, or exploding cage, excuse me, dot. And you'll notice that now when we bring up the exploding cage class, we have these three variables that we created: the cage explodes, the min and max downtime. So we're going to go ahead and click on cage explodes, and we're going to set this equal to whatever checkbox1.checked is. So if the player has the checkbox checked, then cage explodes will be true. If they do not have it checked, then cage explodes will be false. Then we're going to do the same thing for our numeric up-down values. So we're going to go to exploding cage.minimum downtime, min downtime, and that's going to equal numeric up-down 1.value, and that's going to throw an error because this is a decimal and minimum downtime is an integer. So we just need to cast this to an integer, and you just do that by adding int in front of numeric up-down 1.value. And so that tells it that we don't care that you might be losing some data from whatever is stored in numeric up to one or numeric up down one dot value when it's turned into an integer, that we specifically want it to be an integer, and that extra data is not important to us. So that's what we want. Well, that's what we need to do, because a decimal can hold additional data that an integer can't. And then we're going to do the same thing with max downtime. We're also going to need to cast this to an int, except now we're getting numeric up down 2 dot value. And so now we have changed the values of our initial, or of our, that we're using to store the information. And that's good. We want to do that. But let's say the user plays 2 cage matches, and doesn't, for some reason, change anything. What we're going to want to do, just to make sure that the values reset, is we're going to go to our exploding cage thing, and where we call this up, even before we check to see if the ring kind is there, we just want to set all these back to their default values. So basically, when we initialize the match, everything is back to its default value from the get-go. That way, if this never pops up for some stupid reason, everything is at least back to the default value, and you're not going to get any major problems. So we're going to go ahead, and the easiest way to do that is just to copy and paste from where you named it all the way out to the semicolon, and then just paste it in there. So now when that pops up, or when the match initializes, it will set everything back to their initial values, and then check to see if it's a cage match, pop up the form, and allow the user to change the values. It's just safer that way. It's not entirely necessary, but like I said, it's safer. If for some reason they are playing a cage match and this never pops up, at least these have values now. And that's kind of what we want. So there we go. That's what we're going to do, and that is the easy way to do it. And now we know that the user can decide whether they want a cage to explode or not. So we don't need to run this every single time this hammer throw executes, because we don't need this to execute if the cage is not going to explode. So what we can do here is we have that cage explodes Boolean up there. So we can go if cage explodes, and then curly braces, and then we're going to delete that last curly brace, come down to the end of this, and just plop it in there. So then basically this entire block of code is only run if this cage explodes value is true, and it can only be true if the user gets the dialog to pop up and then checks the box. So if this box is checked and they hit OK, that is the only way that value could be true. So that's the only time that this will run. And that's what we want there. So now you've basically set yourself up a form that you can give the user the option to have an exploding cage and to set the amount of downtime, which we still need to do. So let's go ahead, and you'll remember that when we did the downtime, it was in the elapsed event. So we need to bring up our timer code here, and we've got this downtime integer here. Integer downtime equals unity engine random.range 60 to 180. Well, so now we know that we have a user-defined downtime. So what we're going to do is we need to bring up our exploding cage.min downtime as the minimum value for this expression, and exploding cage.max downtime +1 for our maximum downtime. The reason we did the +1 is because the maximum in a random range expression is not included. So because we want it to be included, we just do +1. So it'll be, let's say the user sets it to 180. The maximum will be 181. So that will give every value from whatever the minimum is all the way up to 180, because that maximum is excluded from being selectable by the random. So there we go. So now that will allow you to set the downtime and for that to be honored by the code. So now we've got just about everything we need to make this work. But let's say we wanted to make it a little bit more like the old Fire Pro D exploding cage, which didn't have ropes. And yeah, let's say just for the hell of it, we decide we don't want any ropes in the ring, and let's make that an option just for the hell of it. And we can do that by adding another checkbox to the exploding cage options form. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll bring out our checkbox. We will line it up with the other checkbox. And we will go ahead and make it transparent. There we go. And then we will go ahead and we'll call it no ropes. So now we've got the no ropes option. But again, it's just a checkbox. It doesn't do anything yet. We've got to come over here, and just like we set up public static values for all of our other variables that we wanted to store, we have to do that for the ropes. So we're going to go no ropes, and that is going to equal false as well. Then we'll come down here to where we reset all of our values in the match initialization, and we're going to go no ropes equals false. So there we go. Now we've got the value that we can store into. It will be initialized as false when a new match starts. So we're going to go back here, and when we close it, we're going to just go ahead and do the exact same thing we did before. So exploding cage.noRopes equals, and this is going to be checkbox2.checked. Or if you named your controls, it'll be whatever name you give them. You can name them. I'm not in the habit of naming controls, which is not a great habit to be in, I suppose, but it's just kind of how the mod pack works, so I tend not to name them. I recommend naming them if you're new to programming. Don't get into the bad habit. So yeah, you go back and name these if you're new. Name all of your controls. Always name your controls if you're new and you're not already in the habit of not naming them. But yeah, I just don't do it. It's a bad habit. So the other thing that I'm going to do here is I hate when these labels overlap the edges of the boxes. So I'm going to click on both of them so that they're both selected, and I'm just going to go bring to front. And that will bring them in front of the label. So even though the label doesn't look like it will overlap the box, it absolutely will for some stupid reason. So yeah, just click on one, hold down Control, click on the second one, then right-click on one and go to bring to front, and then it won't do that anymore. So that's how to handle that if you're kind of anal retentive like I am and you don't want it in front. So yeah, now we have that no ropes. Now let's think of some things that happen with the ropes. People can bounce off of them, but we don't have ropes, so we don't want that. People can be Irish whipped into them. We don't have ropes. We don't want that. When we get rid of the ropes, we're also going to get rid of the turnbuckles, so we need to remove the ability for the player to lean against the turnbuckles, or be Irish whipped into the turnbuckles. We also need to remove the ropes. So basically, those are the things that happen when you have ropes, so we need to address those things. So to address those things, we need to come down here to our IL spy. We need to close up the ring there. We need to go back up to player. and we know where the hammer throws are, because we used one when we changed when we made the cage explode when the guy did the throw into the cage. So what we need to do is we're going to need to modify that even more. We're actually going to completely bypass it when no ropes is checked. And so I'm going to show you how to completely bypass a method. And so what we're going to need to do is we come into the process hammer throw. We're going to leave that up for now. And we are going to go back into our thing. Exploding cage tutorial for me. We are going to go public static, and this needs to be a bool. And I'll tell you why in a second, but it needs to be a public static bool. And we are going to go no hammer throw. And we are in the player class, and so I'm going to assume that this is going to take a player object. So I'm just going to pop it in there right now. And then I'm going to write my hook, because it'll be easy to figure out where we need to hook, because we're going to overwrite the whole, or we're going to bypass the whole method under certain circumstances. So public class is player, target method equals, and this is process hammer throw. I had to look up there at the one above it, and we're going to go injection location, and this is going to equal 0. And then we need injection direction, and that's going to be before. Injection flags equals, we already have the player down there, so we're going to pass the invoking instance, because why not? It couldn't hurt. And we want to override the original code under certain circumstances by completely bypassing it. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a pipe, which is if you hit shift and then backspace, it's going to put in a pipe, and you can only do this in enums. This is going to tell it that we are actually passing in 2 enum values or enum values into inject flags, and it will allow you to enter another hook inject flag. So we're going to do that, and this one is going to be modify return. So that's what we're going to put in there. So it should be inject flags equals hook inject flags dot pass invoking instance, and then the pipe, and then hook inject flags dot modify return. And then we're going to add our group, and this is going to be exploding cage. And then we put in our close parenthesis, and we've got our hook. And you'll notice that this is throwing an error because our bool doesn't return a value on all code paths, because it doesn't return a value at all right now. So what we're going to need to do here is go into our process hammer throw method, and we are going to need to, you'll notice that I already have a no hammer throw here. This is from my testing earlier, so you won't have this. So I'm going to start highlighting underneath that. I am going to literally grab this entire method, so everything all the way down but not including the last curly brace in ILSpy, and we're going to Control-C to copy that. And we're going to go back into our method, and we're going to paste it in. And you'll notice that we're going to get a lot of errors here, a lot of stupid stuff going on, because we have thises, and we actually have a second player object here that can't share the name of the method. So we're going to rename that to player object 2 real quick. It is actually used in other places, so the easier way to do that, let's put it back to player object. There's a reason that this function or this ability exists. So highlight it, or just get the cursor into it there, and it will highlight all instances of that particular player object. And what you're going to want to do is right-click it and hit Rename, and then type in a new name, PLOBJ2, and then hit Apply. And you'll notice that anywhere in this code where it used to say PL object, it now says PL object 2. And our original PL object is still there. So that's what we need to do. And then, if you remember, anytime we copy code and it has a this in it, that is a good indication that we are going to need to pass in the evoking instance. And we did that here, and we called it PL object. So we're going to highlight all of our code, hit Control H, and type this in the find box, and change it to PL object in the replace box, and hit Replace All. And that will find every instance where it says this, and it will change it to just your player object, which is what we want. So now we can close that, and we are good there. So the other thing that we are going to want to do is we literally don't care about most of this code. Where we inserted the cage thing, you know, where he would whip him into the cage here, and then the else, that is literally all we care about. So everything in this else, we don't need. We can get rid of this. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. I think that that is for the else that we need, so don't get rid of that. But you can get rid of everything between the two braces for the else. We don't need any of it. And we will need all of this up here, though. So everything before it, we will need on some level. So let's go ahead and separate that out just to be real quick. And you'll see that we are actually still getting one error. The player class, it can't find this, which probably tells me that it's private, so let's go make sure that that's the case. And it was hammer throw table something, or hammer throw table something. So it's under H, yep. So this is private. So we're going to have to use a modpack.modpack.get field on this. And it is a player enum directory. So what I usually do, or player dir enum, what I usually do when I do these get things is I will highlight this whole thing, except for the global, because fuck a bunch of that. I will copy it. I will go back into my code, and I will go ahead and set that up. So I'm actually just going to set that up right here. So I'm going to remove that semicolon and put in an equals. And now I am going to do the modpack.modpack.get field. And we know this is in the player class, so we'll pass it the PLOBJ because that is an instance of the player class. We will go ahead and tell it that we need the hammer throw HT out TBL. And I can't remember if it's static or not. I believe that it is. You can always come back and look. It is indeed static. So we need to set the is static on this get field thing to true. And then there we go. And we're going to need to cast it to a PL enum or a PL dir enum array. So we're going to go ahead and highlight that and paste it between two parentheses so it turns the object that we get back from the get field method into a PL dir enum array. And there we go. And now we can go down here and where it says global player dot, just get rid of the global player dot. So it just says hammer throw table because we have a local copy of that now. So we don't need the non-local copy. So the other thing that I'm going to do is, see, this checks if it's barbed wire. We don't need that. We only care if it is a cage or not a cage for this particular thing. So we're going to change this to ring kind equals equals, and we're going to get rid of the thing and change it to ring kind equals cage. And since we did that, we don't need to check for it down here. So I'm just going to copy all of this wonderful crap from here and paste it in. And then I am going to get rid of all of this because we don't care about any of that right now. We are literally trying to stop people from hammer throwing. And since this is always going to be what happens in a cage, we don't need to know if it's not in a cage what to do. So we'll just get rid of all of that. So now we have the else to deal with, and we will. One thing that we can do here is return true. And that will, when you return true from one of these modify return groups, it will skip the remaining code in the original method. When you return false, like we're going to do right here, it will run the original method. So this says if it can't find the target player to go ahead and run the original code, which might have error catching for, hey, if the player doesn't exist, if the target player doesn't exist, what do I do? So yeah, if we can't find the target player, then we just want to run the original code. Because if we can't find the target player, something went wrong. And I don't want to write the error catching for it if the error catching for it already exists. So yeah. And then we basically have everything we need for the, see, it already calls the cage explodes method when they throw them and they're close enough to throw them out of the ring. But let's say they're not close enough to throw them out of the ring. What do we do? Well, I decided that we just wanted to have them break the Irish whip. We just don't want them to hammer throw. So what it's going to do is it's going to play that that animation where they try to throw them, but the guy makes his arm real stiff and then pulls it out. So we're going to make them play that if they try to Irish whip them in these cage matches. The reason that I don't allow you to whip them is because the cage is actually farther back than the ropes. And so what would end up happening is you could throw them into the ropes and then they would get to the ropes and they do the wobble thing. Because that's what we're going to replace the rope bounce with. And I don't want to see the wobbling every time there's an Irish whip. I'd rather just have them not Irish whip in these matches. So we're going to go back into IL Spy, and we know that in that process hammer throw, there is going to be an instance where the guy pulls his arm out just because it's something that happens in the game. It's got to be there. So we're going to pour through the hammer throw and see if we can find that instance. So let's see. Check reversal hammer throw. Flag 2 is false. So if it sets flag 2 to true, then it looks like they're reversing. So we are looking, and yep, there it is. We've got the animation now. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of this just straight out of, that's all it does if it's going to do that push away animation, or the arm, which is the arm pull out. So we just copy that, we go back into our code, we paste it in there, and we're going to change this to be PL object again. So let's go ahead and do that. Yep, it's already there. It should already be there for you, so just go ahead and change it out. And there we go. So now it will, if you're close enough to throw them into the cage, it will throw them into the cage and it will explode. If you are not, it will just do the thing where they pull their arm out. And we want to return true from there too. We don't want it to run any original code. And now, no hammer throw is fine. It returns a value on every part of code that it can. But we're going to want a couple more things here, because this code will run no matter what. So even in a regular match, this code will run, and what will end up happening is it will allow them to pull their arm out, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is come up here to where we're checking things before we get to any of the other code, because we don't, if we're just going to return out of this, we don't want to run any unnecessary code. So we are going to use the venue setting to check to make sure it's a cage. So what we're going to do here is, you'll see that in the original code they save out this venue setting. So we'll check venue setting dot ring kind. Oh, we need an if. If venue setting dot ring kind does not equal ring kind dot cage, return false. Because if it's not a cage, we don't even care. If it's not a cage match, the cage can't explode, so we don't need to worry about the Irish whip at all, right? So there we go. And then we need to check for one more thing. We need to check and make sure that no ropes is true, because if the cage match, even if it's a cage match and the cage is set to explode, if it has ropes, we just want it to do what it's always done. So we're going to go if not no ropes, so if exclamation point no ropes, return. So that says if no ropes is false, essentially. We're going to want return false. So if no ropes is false, return false, run the original code, don't run our modified code. And that should do it. That should allow us to have the arm pull out anytime the opponent tries to Irish whip you, or anytime anybody attempts an Irish whip and it's not close enough to just throw them into the cage and there's no ropes, they'll just pull their arm out. It's also why we want to reset these every time, because let's say you run a cage match with no ropes, and then you run a normal match with no ropes, but you inverted these. You inverted these for whatever reason. Like you did the no ropes check first. Well, it could pass that check if you didn't check to see if it was also a cage match. It can get very confusing. So yeah, that's why we always want to reset these, even if it doesn't look like the kind of match that we want to have. We just want to make sure that they're at what is essentially FirePro's default state, which would be, if we have booleans, it would be false most of the time. So yeah, that's why we always reset things. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did the last time I copied code. I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to go up here and do global ::, because I absolutely hate that in my code. I am going to get rid of it. I'm going to make sure that's on selection, and I'm going to hit replace all, and it's going to replace every time it tries to call something from the global namespace, which is totally unnecessary to be denoted. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and do that. And then we have our override of Irish whips, but the player could still run into the ropes on his own if he did just a running attack or something. We don't want that. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to override those as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to write another public static bool. And I don't know why it did that. I must have typoed. Bool. We'll call this no rebound. And we're going to assume, not plain, that it's going to be a player object. And we're going to look in here in our player class to see where they hit the ropes. And we have the process running collisions, if you remember right. We saw them in the last thing where we were looking for the cage stuff. And here we go. So we've got process running collision. We want process in ring parallel ropes. And this is going to get rid of it. And again, you'll see that I have it already patched in. But yeah, that's what we want. So we're going to go ahead and highlight this, because that's where we're going to want to patch it in. We are going to go back to our code, and we're going to write our hook. So hook target class equals player, target method equals, and then we'll just paste that in there since it's got a really long name. And if you misspell or miscapitalize any of that, you will get a patcher error. So if you want to avoid errors, I really highly suggest just copy and pasting. Then we got inject direction. Anytime you really want to override code, you're probably going to do it at 0. Now we need the inject. Inject location should be 0. Inject direction is going to be before. Inject flags is going to be the same as they were up there. So we're going to pass the evoking instance and then add the pipe. And then we're going to put modify return since we want to bypass code. And then our group is going to be, is it exploding cage? Yes. Exploding cage. And so now we are going to want to do the same checks that we did up here for the ring kind and the no ropes, because we don't actually care about this unless those two things are true. So we're going to go ahead and copy that venue setting thing where it grabbed the venue setting and check to make sure it was in a cage. And then we're going to check to make sure no ropes is true. And if it's not on either one of those, we're just going to exit out of it and let it run the default code. And then after that, we need to do something instead of having them rebound. So what should we do? Well, they have that in the, let's say in the barbed wire match where you're not ready to run into the barbed wire and they do that thing where they flail their arms and kind of stop and act like they're off balance and then catch their balance. Well, how about we do that, since they'd be running towards an exploding cage, so they're going to stop themselves and act like they are a little bit off balance until they catch their balance. So in here, there's going to be, in this parallel collision in ring parallel ropes, there's going to be a setting for the barbed wires, would be my assumption. So we're going to check around and see if we can find that. And it actually does not look like it is in here. So let's see if it's in another one. We'll go to rope collision in ring. There it is. If it equals barbed wire, what do we do? Well, it actually isn't there either. So let's try to find another one. Is it in the hammer throw, maybe? Let's give it a whirl. Process hammer throw. It does not equal barbed wire. Let's go down to the else. And so this will be if ring kind equals barbed wire. Straddle at front of rope. There we go. This is what we want. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this. We don't need the mod pack information. So whenever you see something like that, you can go ahead and ignore it if I'm telling you to copy things. So go ahead and grab that. go back to our code, and we're just going to go ahead and paste that in there. And we're going to go ahead and change our thises to our player objects. So we're going to go ahead and this and PLOBJ, and we have it in selection, so it should replace 2. There we go. Actually, is that right? No, that is not what we're looking for, actually, surprisingly enough. So that is actually the animation of them throwing them and then them stopping suddenly. And we don't want that, actually, because this is when they're rebounding. And so what we're actually looking for is the animation where they are thrown into the fence when they're outside of the ring, and they do not have, and the arena doesn't have a fence. So that's actually going to be easier to find. We're going to go to process running collision out of ring, and we're going to look for the anything that says, yeah, here we go. Venue setting does not have fence, or not venue setting has fence. So that's what we're looking for right there. And so we're going to go ahead and pull this up and copy this. This is what we want. Sorry about that. And then we're going to change this to be player object one more time. And that should take care of everything except for the stupid globals, which we will go ahead and get rid of because I don't like them. There we go. So now you see that that is what happens when they are supposed to rebound off the ropes. We are going to go ahead and hit return true. Since if it gets down this far, we don't want it running any of the default code. We just want it doing this and then stopping. So there we go. And then we have one more thing to deal with, if you remember right. I said that when we remove the ropes, we're going to remove the turnbuckles, so we don't want them to be able to lean on the turnbuckle. So we're going to go public static bool no lean player object, and we're going to go back into our IL spy here, and we're going to go process running collision diagonal, because, or in ring diagonal, because that's where it actually runs into the turnbuckle. And we're going to say, all right, well, obviously we're connecting to, or we're hooking in the first, or at the very top. So we're going to want to go to our hook. We got to copy this because it's a super long name, and I don't want to remember where all the capitals are and all the underscores and all that stuff. So go ahead and do that. We're going to write our hook. So let's get our square brackets. Type in hook. Target class equals player. Target method equals this one. Inject location equals 0. Inject direction, I keep hitting minus, is before. Inject flags equals the same flags that we've been doing, so we got pass evoking instance, and then the pipe, and then the modify return. And then our group equals exploding cage. And there we go. We've got our hook. We've got our method. We just need to fill in what to do. We're going to go ahead and copy the same things, that if it's not a cage match and it is not, and there are ropes, then we just want to run whatever the default thing is. And honestly, you're just going to copy and paste this to the same thing. So you go ahead and you do that. And you're going to end up with another method that pastes into, or that hooks here and overrides this if that's true. And here's a pro tip. If you don't want to write two methods like this and they're going to do the exact same thing, this is actually perfectly okay to do. And you do not need this method at that point. So, yeah, I recommend if you're not comfortable doing this, that you go ahead and write both methods. It's not going to hurt anything. But if you feel comfortable that you know that this method will work on both things, you could just go ahead and put two hooks on the same method. And that's what I'm going to do here because it just saves us the... it just makes our code smaller. So that should be everything that we need. I'm going to go ahead and check my tutorial, or the one that I did originally, just to be sure that is all we need for this. There's the process hammer throw, the no hammer throw. We've got that. We've got these two. See, I did it this way before. And so yeah, but that's all we need for that. Now, we actually need to take the ropes away, which is actually not that hard to do. We're going to do it in here. We need to do it after we've displayed the dialog. And we're going to say if no ropes, it's going to run a bunch of additional code. And it will check that after the dialog has popped up and been disposed of. So the user will have set the no ropes thing if they wanted to, and it will be false if this never pops up. So this will only run if this pops up, and then the user selects no ropes, which is nice and handy. So I am not going to give a big dissertation on how I found all of these. I am going to show you one time when we get into the game how I found them through a feature of the mod pack that isn't documented. Most people, I think, know about it at this point, but you know, just it's useful, but it's a shitty dev feature that I don't try to clean up. There's lots of things that don't do anything. I will randomly add buttons to it that I don't explain and don't label. So it's really only for developing mods. So I'm going to copy this big list of these are components, and these are the component names. So we're going to go ahead and copy that big list of components. And all of these components, as you can tell, there's shadow, bottom, middle, and top, rope, bottom, middle, and top, etc. These are all of the things that we want to turn off. Or hide. And they're all things that involve the ropes, the turnbuckles, or the posts. And so we have a big list that's pre-compiled. If I was you, I would go ahead and pause the video and type this out. If I remember, I can put the list in the description of the video so that you could just cut and paste it from there. But I can't guarantee that I will remember that. And then, so you've got your list of string, which I called ropeComps. And always when you're dealing with a list, make sure to do a new list of string before you start adding things to it. So otherwise you'll get null reference errors. So your first line here should be list string ropeComps equals new list string. And the string is in these, it's in greater than and less than symbols, so, or it's in between them. So yeah. But once you've done that, what you're going to want to do is use Unity. So this is why we have Unity Engine as a using, because you never know when you're going to use it. And so what we're going to do is define an array of components. And component, and then the two the two square brackets that denotes an array. So you have a component array, and we're going to call this comps equals, and then we're going to do Unity Engine dot game, or can we do yeah, we'll do game object dot Here, I'm going to check what I did in the other code. I don't often grab big lists of components. I did UnityEngine.Object, find objects of type. Okay, so there we go. That's what we're going to do. UnityEngine.Object.find objects of type. And we want to make sure it's objects with like plural and not object. And we also want to make sure that it has the one with the greater than and equal than symbol in it. And inside that greater than and equal symbol, we're going to put in the type that we want. And in this case, it is component. It helps if I spell that right. Component. There we go. And so this will literally get us an array of components, or an array of components. So now we have all of the components that are loaded up currently through Unity, and now we just need to iterate through them. So what we're going to do is for each component comp in comps, and this starts a loop, and it will loop through each component in your comps array. And we're going to say if comp.name. No, we're not. We're going to say if comp, or goddamn. Okay, let's start over. If ropeComps.contains, and then comp.name. What we're going to do is if it's in that list of rope comps, we're going to disable it. And to do that, you do comp.active or setActive, or nope, they don't have setActive anymore. Where rope.gameObject or comp.gameObject.setActive to false. Sorry, it's been a while since I've done any of this sort of programming from scratch. So yeah, comp.gameObject.setActive.false, and that should be what my other code says too, correct? Yes, that's what both of them say. Oop. I don't need that open. Misclick there. Yep, that is what both of them say. So we're good. All right. So that is going to turn off all the ropes. If that's available. And that's going to be all we need to turn off ropes. So that wasn't that hard. You'll notice that, you know, turning something on or off is actually pretty simple. But how do you figure out what to turn on and off? And like I said, I'm going to show you how to do that when we start up the game. But this should be everything. This should take care of everything. There's going to be one little thing that you're going to want to do. Oop, I missed a parenthesis. I failed to close a parenthesis somewhere. Line 164. Oh, yep, in my hook. I failed to close. Okay, so let's do the thing that I'm talking about here. So when you have something that is a minimum and a maximum, like these boxes here, you never want the maximum to be able to go above, or the minimum to be able to go above the maximum, or the maximum to be able to go below the minimum. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that that can't happen. So we're going to click this, and we're going to make sure that the minimum can never go below the maximum, or above the maximum. So we're going to say if numeric up-down1.value is greater than numeric up-down2.value, numeric up-down1.value equals numeric up-down2.value. So this will allow you to set something that doesn't have a range. So numeric up-down2, let's say your maximum is 180 and your minimum is 180. Well, that's just going to pick 180. So that allows you to have no range, but it doesn't allow your minimum to go above your maximum. Then we're going to go back to maximum downtime, do the same thing, double click it, and we're going to go if numeric up-down2.value is less than numeric up down 1 dot value, numeric up down 1 or 2 dot value equals numeric up down 1 dot value. And again, this does the same thing. It allows you to set it so it has no range, but it will not allow you to set a maximum value that is less than the minimum value. And there we go. Now we've done everything we need to do. So let's go ahead and build our exploding cage. We are going to go ahead and go into our repos, our exploding cage tutorial. Yours may...
There is a reminder for Carl.
Thanks, Google. So we're going to go into our exploding cage tutorial. Yours will probably still be called exploding cage. I had to redo mine because I ended up creating the, making sure everything was going to work. So we're going to highlight our DLL, copy it, go to our manage directory, and paste it. It's going to paste it in there. I'm going to get rid of zCageExplode because I don't need that one anymore. And then we're going to go back to FirePro Wrestling World and our patcher. And we're going to make sure that our zCageExplosion is checked and that exploding cage is checked. And we're going to patch. And so that went ahead and did what we needed it to. So now there's two more things. I'm going to show you the final result here of our exploding cage with no ropes. And I'm going to show you how to get component names and check and see what's loaded and that sort of thing. So we're going to go ahead and load up FirePro. We'll start with my save here, and it's going to load up all of the always active windows. And remember, ours won't pop up in here. It is not, this isn't what our window is. And then the first thing I'm going to do is show you how I got that information, because you need to do it right here from the main menu. So when you're in this main menu, you press the F5 button, and that's going to bring up this really ugly looking form that has all kinds of stuff. Some of it doesn't work, some of it does. But yeah, so this form is going to be, you're just going to leave it open. What you're going to want to do is, if, let's say you need something from a match, you're just going to start a match. I'm picking normal match. We don't need to show off the cage stuff quite yet. Yeah, you just pick a match. And let's say you're looking to see what's loaded during an entrance, or what differs between an entrance and a match. So while they're doing their entrances, you just hit refresh. This list will generate every single object that is loaded in the game. Let's turn down FirePro too, because that is just outrageously loud. Where is FirePro? Why is this not working? Anyway, so that's how this works. If you hit refresh again, it will refresh. In some arenas, the list will actually, there will be things that do not load during a match that load during an entrance. They're entrance only things. But yeah, so that's basically what you do. That's how I found, if you go down here, and it's in alphabetical order, but you'll see the posts. And if we go down here, you'll find the ropes, and you'll find the shadows if you look to S. But yeah, that's how we figure that stuff out. And they will show up on this list multiple times. They're all the same thing. Like, all of these shadow bottoms are the same thing. They just show up multiple times because when I wrote this thing, it grabs multiple things that I needed at the time and listed them out. So, and I just never bothered to fix it because, again, it's a dev tool. It's unimportant that it is neat or efficient. or anything like that. No one is ever going to use it unless they're writing mods, really. So, but that's that. And it's a crapshoot. You really just have to look through the list and try things. If you're writing a big list like this, sometimes you might get something that you turn off and you're like, oops, that wasn't what I was looking for. Or sometimes you might, it might take a little bit of work, or you might not. Let's say you turn off all the ropes, but you don't realize that the shadows belong to the ropes. So you turn off all the ropes, but you still got the shadows, etc. It's going to take some trial and error to get everything that you need turned off. So yeah, there we go. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah. But once you've got it, and it's not too hard to use. It's just kind of, time-consuming. But let's show you the cage match. So we're going to do our cage match plus. We've already got some guys selected. We're going to go to entry finished. And it's going to do its thing. And then it will pop up our cage match form when it gets to the point in the code where it wants to pop it up. And here it is. We forgot to set a transparency key, which I will show you how to do. That's why it's still square. But we'll go ahead and turn these two things on. We want the cage to explode, and we want there to be no ropes. Then we'll hit OK. It will continue to do its thing. And you will notice that we now have an exploding cage with no ropes. So when I Irish whip him, he doesn't go anywhere. But when I'm close enough to the ropes, I can still throw him into it. And when I run to the ropes, I do that. That can still happen, though. And that is something that I did not... See, that's stuff, you don't think of it until you're testing. So, we're going to have to find and remove that at some point. And take care of that. And I think that I will show you how to do that in the next tutorial, because we're already pushing an hour and 30 minutes, which is a pretty long time to be doing this. But as you can see, it will pop up. I'm going to show you a couple of more things. I'm going to show you how to fix that dialogue that pops up, because that was just my bad. So you're going to come over here to the exploding, or cage explodes form design. And over here, there's going to be something down at the bottom that says transparency key. And you're going to set that to red, like the background of the box. And then we're going to come up here. We're going to turn control box on to false. We're going to set start position to center screen. And we're going to set topmost to true. And show in taskbar to false. And then we're going to go ahead and build one more time. We are going to go to our thing here, which is not this one for me anymore. It is this one. Bin, debug, cage explosion. We're going to paste it in there and overwrite. And then we are going to reload the game, and I'm going to show you that it looks much nicer now. Because I forgot to do those things when we were creating the form. And that's actually something that happens to me frequently when I'm using these pop-up dialogues that are that I use the transparency and stuff in. I often forget to set the transparency key and stuff. So, but let's show you that that looks much nicer. Oh, that's a normal match. I don't want that. Cage match plus. We're not even going to watch the match, so we'll just pick two guys. We'll go with these two guys. We'll go to finish. And now it will pop up right in the center of our screen. Oh, we got match attire this time, too. And here we go. See, it popped up, and it's cut out now. We don't have that red border or the red square around it. We just have the red from the background image that we used. We'll go ahead and check these off again, hit OK. And there we go. But that's how it's done. And that should get you working. And like I said, So we'll have to come back and modify some more code to make sure that the head thing doesn't happen. But other than that, we're doing pretty well here. And I'm going to stop it there. We're going to work on this one more time. Next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to stop that head thing from happening, obviously. And I'm also going to show you how to tidy up your patcher stuff so that it will have a description and a name and all of that wonderful stuff. And I'm thinking of maybe one or two other things that we can do, but I'm not totally sure yet. But at least we'll fix the missing stuff here, and we will show you how to write patcher descriptions so that users can see if it's something they want to check off or not. All right, so that is it for us for this particular tutorial. I will be back again probably Friday. I'm probably going to take tomorrow off to do another tutorial, and I will see you all then.